very beautiful person who is here this evening was talking to someone who was here for the first time, and he said, "A day never passes that I don't improve something in my life. Every day I find something to change, and I change it. And therefore I change my life every day." And just as I was walking in earlier, someone said to me, "Oh, Jack, I'm learning so much about myself and other people. Sometimes it's so painful, but I love it, I love it." Growth is painful, birth is painful, you know that. This is the 5th lesson in a series of 8 lessons on techniques for creative living. If you and I are to be changed, we must participate in that change. We must cooperate with that change. This magnificent universe is always moving. It is constantly changing its form and its shape. It is perfect and permanent, changeless, but always changing. That's the paradox. The title of our lesson tonight is a good one, I think. How to understand other people as you would have them understand you without expecting them to understand you at all. Most people spend more time and energy working on relationships than they spend working on becoming truly effective, successful human beings. Have you noticed that if we're not busily at work working on some important relationship, we are busily at work reacting to imaginary situations with all sorts of self-defeating emotional responses and behavioral patterns? Most of our reactions are not to real things at all, but to imaginary situations that exist in our minds. And as long as we act this way, we never get anywhere in real life. Because the moment that we start doing something that counts, we come up against another person's judgment and their resistance, and then we quit. And we quit because we become psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually immobilized. You will never win if you have to convince others that you are a winner. As a matter of fact, if you're trying to convince others that you are a winner, you probably are still a loser. And they know it. If you're always trying to prove your worth to people through your words or behavior, if you are always trying to explain yourself to other people, trying to make them understand you so that you can be comfortable, then you can know for certain that you'll never get the job done in your own life, because this is the behavior pattern of a loser. Winners don't have to explain themselves. They just get on with the business of living, of functioning, of accomplishing, and of doing. And in time, their actions become self-explanatory. I'd like to ask you 6 or 7 questions. Be honest with your response. Do you get upset when you can't get a point across to other people? You want them to understand you. Do you have to tell others whenever you've defeated someone else at something? When you've won an argument and later on you're giving a report and you make yourself a little more of a hero or a heroine than you actually were. I really got them told. Is it hard for you to assert your own need for privacy without feeling guilty? You need some time alone. Do you find yourself being dragged down by the sour dispositions of other people? Do you find yourself saying or thinking, he or she doesn't understand me, and being diminished because they haven't understood you? Do you feel that suffering is natural and that you're supposed to suffer on this earth? Why, people have always suffered on this earth. It's only human to suffer. You find it difficult to walk away from people that you find disturbing or depressing or annoying? Well, when I say walk away, to get out of the telephone conversation. To just say, gosh, I don't want any more of this. Do you spend a lot of time analyzing your relationships with friends and relatives, thinking, now I wonder what that meant? Or if only they would do something else, then my life would be different. Do you find yourself doing a lot of talking in your head about what they said or what they didn't say? Do you? Well, if you said yes to any one of these, you've got a real problem. And in that particular area, you have immobilized yourself, and you will not move forward until you can see and correct the problem. You see, it's great to have the approval of others. But if you need the approval of other people and cannot function well without it, then you're at the mercy of other people. If you need their approval, and if they refuse to recognize your value or your achievements or your presence for whatever reason, then you will collapse or be immobilized or hurt or depressed. And this happens if you lack self-esteem. Because if we really do not value ourselves enough, we will look to others for verification of our own worth. And once you need that reinforcement from outside your own spirit, you have at that moment volunteered to become a victim of failure and despair, and you will be controlled. You will be manipulated because you will draw to you the people that will take charge of your life from the outside, and they will know which one of your buttons to push. They've got the combination. You do not need to be important in other people's eyes. In fact, the attempt to make yourself important stems from an inner weakness and results in diminishing returns, because the more we try to cause people to have a high value of us, in all probability, we will decrease their value of us. Now, there's a difference in being quietly effective and loudly ineffective. And one example appeared in Ann Lander's column in today's Free Press. Dear Ann Landers, I'm writing about the letter signed by Mary Lou from Rochester. That woman really ran herself into the ground. She was a compulsive talker and became depressed when she got home and realized that she had done it again. But I am like Mary Lou. It's as though someone pushed a button and I, the talking doll, am off running my mouth like crazy. Your answer didn't help me much, Ann. If someone sends in a solution, I hope you will print it. Signed, another blabbermouth. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's anyone here is a blabbermouth. But, like compulsive eating and compulsive drinking, sometimes we are compulsive talkers, you know. The ability to quietly take charge of your own mind, of your own emotions, of your own voice, and of your own reactions is so important that I simply cannot overemphasize how necessary this control is to your ultimate success. Now, Jesus, who was a master teacher of how the human mind works, stressed again and again the need to become quietly effective. Let me give you three of his examples. The first one, he had gone up to the mountain where he was transfigured, and he had Peter, James, and John with him. And you know the story. Moses and Elijah appeared and began talking with Jesus. Teacher, this is wonderful, Peter exclaimed. He said this just to be talking, for he didn't know what else to say, and they were all terribly frightened. Have you recently found yourself in a social situation, and so you didn't know what to say, so you just started talking? Talk, talk, talk. I'm nervous, I'll talk, talk, talk. I'll say something, and we do. Now, as they descended the mountainside, Jesus told them never to mention what they had seen until after he had risen from the dead. In other words, don't mention this until after I've made my demonstration. Why? Because it's a very important principle. You will talk yourself out of your demonstration. Talk to the wrong people and see what happens. You think they would believe it? Suppose that the disciples had started talking to ordinary people about what they had experienced on the mountaintop. Who would have believed that? Suppose that you talk to ordinary people about your dreams, your hopes, your desires, what's happening in your life, your enthusiasm, your conscious contact with God. Do you believe that these people that have known you all of your life believe that you are now experiencing a conscious contact with God and they're not? Tell them and see. Look at the expression on their face. Matthew, the 8th chapter, the 8th verse. Now, a leper came up to him and said, Master, if you touch me, I will be healed. Will you touch me? Will you heal me? And Jesus said, I will, and touched him, and he was healed. And then he told him a very important thing. He said, go your way and tell no man. Go your way and don't tell anyone. Or go and see the priests, because it's necessary for the priest to give you a clean bill of health. In those days, they didn't have physicians, and so the priests were the ones that said, oh, you're not a leper anymore. You've been healed. Go do that, but don't tell ordinary people. Because the first thing you know, they'll talk you out of it, and you will begin to believe that you haven't been healed, and the moment that you begin to believe that you haven't been healed, you won't be healed. Matthew, the 7th chapter, the 6th verse, and this is the one I love. Do not throw your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn and rend you. That means attack you, probably from the rear. Now, he was not talking about pearls or pigs. He was talking about consciousness. Don't take your thoughts and put them in the front of people who do not understand them. Because the first thing you know, you will not have your thoughts, and you will not have the people either. And he used the example, put your pearls. Imagine if you had some pearls, valuable pearls. Would you throw them into a pig pen for the pigs to examine? You know what happens with something in a pig pen. It goes right to the bottom. And the moment that you get in there to get your precious pearls out, they will turn and rend you. Very picturesque, isn't it? Jesus really knew what he was talking about. Now, when self-confidence comes, we stop expecting everyone to understand us, and when we stop expecting everyone to understand us, we stop a lot of the talk that we are. You see, one reason why that you want to cast your pearls before other people is so they will understand where you're coming from, right? Well, they're not. So quit it. Now, when your self-confidence comes, you don't need them to understand you. All you need is to understand them, and you already understand them. And you will love them. Another thing that will happen will be that you will begin to find your own privacy and solitude more acceptable. And if someone wishes to leave your life, whether it be a friend or a member of your family, you will loose them, you will let them go, you will understand. You do not need them. Oh, you would love to have them, but you don't need them. It's worth considering. My beautiful friend, you will never be understood all the time. But remember, you don't even understand yourself all the time. You haven't understood yourself all day long today. I'll guarantee you that if you've been observing yourself, you've done some strange things that you don't understand. Now, you will not always understand others all the time, especially in their time of greatest need. You will not. So give people the right to not understand you. And give yourself the right to not feel disappointed or hurt or diminished. And here's some techniques that you can use that will help you to be quietly effective. Quietly. The first one is learn to laugh where you used to cry. As a matter of fact, if you find yourself crying from sadness, take a good look at it, and you'll see that someone has probably turned and rended you. You get that picture in your mind and start laughing. And remember that you did it yourself. You put yourself in that very position, if you will be honest with yourself. Shrug it off. Don't take yourself or any event so seriously anymore. I guarantee you that 100 years from now, they really won't know what happened. And it won't make any difference to you either. You'll be in a different place. A shrug and a so what to yourself, and you've handled the whole thing. Now, this is the mark of a person who is a non-victim, not a phony. This is not being a phony. This is really being in charge of your mind and of your life. Technique number 2. Stop being hurt or offended. You need never be offended again or put down by things that are directed to you by people in the world that do not understand you. Those that Jesus gave the example of a few moments ago who simply cannot understand you. And so if you give them the opportunity, they're going to misunderstand and they will abuse you. By being offended and upset by saying things in your own mind, how dare you say that about me? As nice as I've been to you all these years, how could you possibly think that? You have no right to upset me this way. Stop being reduced to the level of others by reacting to the conduct of people that you do not respect. Have you noticed that so often when someone upsets you, it's someone that you don't particularly respect anyhow? And the moment that you start being upset, you immediately go to their level. The moment this morning that I had written this note, I glanced over and on my desk was a copy of Wayne Dyer's book, Pulling Your Own Strings, and I was about to pick it up to see what his reference was to this idea, and the telephone rang, and my secretaries were not in yet. One had just walked in the door, but I was still answering the telephone. And there was an angry, feminine voice on the other end. It's one of the most amazing telephone calls that I've had in a long time. Because it came, remember, at this precise moment when I had written, stop being reduced to the level of others by reacting to the conduct of people you do not respect. And this lady, this angry lady said, are you Jack Boland? And I said, yes, I am. I knew I had something coming by the tone of her voice. Now, I just had Wayne Dyer's book in my hand. She said, 2 years ago, when you had Wayne Dyer at the lecture at Regina Auditorium, you offended me. And for the life of me, I could not remember what I had done to offend anyone. I remember some things that Wayne said that could have offended some people. I still don't know what I did. She didn't tell me. These were her next words. I have been dying for 2 years to tell you off. I've been dying for 2 years. And she had a coughing attack, and she said, pardon me, it's my emphysema. True story. And then she said some things to me that you would not believe. Well, maybe you would believe them, too. Among other things, she told me that I was an absolute phony, that I did not believe any of the things that I said, and that all that I wanted to do was to take advantage of people, and this was the nice part. I'm not going to tell you about the rest of it. But she closed by saying, you simply have no right to exist upon this earth. How do you like that? And I was looking at my notes. And I thought, now, if she will say that to me, she doesn't even know me. What will she say to her friends, whom she does know? And I felt so sorry for her, and in closing I said, Miss, she would not tell me her name. I said, I'm going to pray for you. And then she really put a cussing on me when I said that. But I meant it. And I stopped and I spent some few minutes there just really loving her. Really loving her. The 5th chapter of Matthew. Pray for them. Do good to them that despitefully use you. You've heard it said that you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who insult and persecute you. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? And if you salute only your brethren, what more are you than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. She really did not get to me. But even so, I had to take that opportunity to let my mind give good for evil. I knew that she meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. It was meant for my own growth, wasn't it? And for a few minutes there, let me tell you, I had a real exercise. Technique number 3 or 4. Stop analyzing your relationships to death. If you feel you have to sit down and work on your relationships, particularly with your spouse or your lover, on a regular basis, then you just might be in a more neurotic situation than you possibly imagined. Now, I know that there never has been nor shall there ever be a fully developed relationship. The most important friendships that you have need constant adjustment upwards. We understand that, don't we? Never take your friends for granted. And every time I perform a marriage ceremony here, we talk about this idea that the most detrimental thing in marriage is when two people begin to take each other for granted. They stop growing together and stop making their adjustments as they go along. But suppose that you're in a relationship and all day long you're thinking in your mind about how it's going to be fixed. Because every time it gets fixed, it gets bent out of shape again. Suppose you had an automobile and every time you got in it to drive it somewhere, it broke down. And every time it broke down, you get it fixed. But you spend an awful lot of time talking to that mechanic about what's wrong with it and making certain adjustments, and then you get in it, and 3 blocks later it's broken down. I know people that live in relationships like this for years and years and years. They're always fixing something. And they can be working all day long, and they're thinking about fixing their relationship, and they go back fixing it, and they call that communication. That's love. They're in sync with each other, is what it is. And if you're in such a relationship, stop and evaluate it and become aware that this is not the way that you were destined to live. What would you do if you had an automobile that wouldn't run properly? I know what you would do. There's some relationships that have to go because they never have run properly, nor shall they ever. Now don't go home until, what's their name that I said? Oh, here is a technique. You're going to love this one. Stop arguing. Arguing never works to your advantage. It never has, nor shall it ever. The old idea that people argue with each other is a sign of their love, that just must be seriously challenged. I know that you can be seduced into an argument with almost anyone at almost any time, but notice that every time that you find yourself upset, your blood pressure begins to increase, you move toward violence. You may not have lost your temper, but you're moving toward it. It will be there in time. And some people do this and then leave the situation calling that normal. It's not normal at all. It's self-defeating, self-immobilizing activity. Repudiate the idea that arguing is always healthy. It is never healthy. Notice that people who really need to argue, and there are people that you know that love to argue, they need it. They are bores to be around, and with their punishing language, they're always trying to make someone else their victim, someone else their pawn. Don't do it. You'll also notice that when you're arguing with someone who doesn't understand you, that every time you prove to them in that argument that they were right, you can never ever argue your way into a conviction that you were right. Even if you make your point, you're wrong in the eye of the other person. No one has ever won an argument. And yet we continue to do it. It's one of the major sports in our society, I suppose. Lenore, who is in charge of our cassette department, was driving her new car last Sunday. Brand new. She had not had it a week. You recall how icy the roads were? And she was driving along with her brand new car, very, very careful, driving slowly, and another driver pulled out just in front of her, and she could not stop, and she crashed into him head on, and then there was a sideways crash as they both spun around and did about $1,000 worth of damage to her car. And the police were called, and in time they arrived, and they took a statement from the other driver, and he immediately told the policeman that she was speeding, driving recklessly, gave a completely erroneous report. Lenore's 15-year-old son was standing there and said, "Mother, did you hear that? Aren't you going to tell him how it really was?" And she said no. And she didn't have to, because the policeman saw and understood and took and defended her. A few minutes later, because her attitude did not change, she was not disturbed by the accident or what the person said, they continued on their shopping spree, she and her son, and in a little while he met one of his high school friends, a young girl his age, told her the accident, and she was astonished and said, "You mean you're still shopping? Your mother's not upset? She's not disturbed? She's not angry?" And of course not. You see, we have to quietly continue to demonstrate a new response to every situation that comes in our lives. Another remarkable thing happened. It's detailed and I can't share it with you, but because Lenore's attitude remained fourth dimensional, she had an experience with a very important person in her life, a conversation that she had been praying to have for many, many months or years. And it developed into one of the most worthwhile afternoons that she has ever spent. It made the accident worth it. Great good came out of what appeared to be evil. It was not evil at all. Here's a technique that might shock you. Don't always tell the truth. Did that shock you when I said that? Now, I did not say lie. I said don't always tell the truth. Never tell the things that can later be used to your disadvantage or to someone else's disadvantage. Are you a habitual truth teller at all costs? Then it will cost you. Do you call that honesty? I'm going to tell the truth. If it happened, I'm going to tell it. You think that's telling the truth? No. It may be telling the truth, but it frequently works to your disadvantage. Now, I have this on the very best authority. Jesus Christ. Does that surprise you? Well, remember the story when he went into the temple and cleaned it out, and that means going into your consciousness and cleaning it out. But he used a real live temple with real live people and animals and doves and pigeons and all kinds of things, and he just cleaned it out. And when he got the job done pretty good, the chief priests and other Jewish leaders came up to him demanding, "What's going on here? Who gave you the authority to drive out the merchants?" And Jesus replied, he knew that whatever he said was going to get him in trouble. If he did it, he was in trouble. If he said, "God told me," he knew he had a real problem. So he said, "I'll tell you if you answer one question. What about John the Baptist? Was he sent by God or not? Answer me." And they talked it over among themselves, and they said, "If we reply that God sent him, then he will say, 'All right, then why didn't you accept him?' But if we say God didn't send him, then the people will start a riot because the people believe that John was a prophet. And so they said, we can't answer. We don't know. To which Jesus replied, then I won't answer your question either. You see, he was not about to get himself in trouble unnecessarily. Look back over your life, and I would say that more than 50% of problems that you've had have stemmed from the fact that you talked too much and told too many of the facts because someone said, answer my question. And you answered their question, didn't you? And you called it the truth. That's not the truth. Simply it's not the truth at all. Any time that you tell somebody a fact that they cannot handle, then you have demeaned them and diminished yourself in that process. What is lying? What constitutes a lie? Suppose you have information about yourself that you believe you have a right to keep private. It's just nobody else's business. Then keep it private. And if someone comes along and asks you to reveal that information, then you just don't do it. Just simply don't do it. And I don't care who it is. In counseling, I would say that one of the major problems that I and other counselors have experienced is in this area where one or more persons in a relationship have talked too much about things past under the guise of being honest and telling the truth. And in so doing, they frequently say something to the other person that cannot be handled by the other person, and that later on diminishes them in the eyes and the mind of that other person. So remember that there's no court in the land that requires you to testify against yourself. Yet we're always doing it. If we're not really at ease with ourselves, we will have a tendency to try to explain things to people. We're always talking like Peter, like James on the Mount of Transfiguration. We don't know what to say, so we just start talking, and we say some things. Just not long ago, I heard someone say, well, I'm stupid. Well, if you are, don't tell anybody. And they may never find it out. But of course, I'm teasing. You're not. But you tell your own mind that you are, and in time you will come to believe it, and if you believe it, you will act like it, and if you start acting like it, then you will have to say that you are. Just look at that stupid thing that this stupid person that I am did. Don't do that. The next technique. Avoid people who want you to join them in their misery. And take a long detour around crises creators. People who have been involved in a series of crises in the past can't wait to get their hands on their next victim. And if you're not careful, it will be you. Why do you think that somebody who has been through a series of crises is suddenly fixed because you have arrived on the scene? They're not. The simplest way to deal with crises creators and grumpy people is to stay away from them. To simply stay away from them. Simply stay away from them. Now this may sound harsh, but it is a very useful strategy. Grouchy people, negative people, all get something out of their despondency, out of their negativity. And usually what they get is your attention. And more than that, they will try very hard to get you to join them. Do not believe that they want to get fixed. If they continue over a period of time, don't you think that they want to get well? If they wanted to get well, they would be getting well. They would be joining you in your wellness, not asking you to come down each time and join them in the pig pen. Just don't get in there with them. Now, by hanging around these sourpusses, you'll find that you'll be drawn right down to their level. And you'll be doing both them and yourself a favor if you will begin to avoid them, if you will avoid them like the plague, because that really is what it is. It's a kind of plague that will consume you. By definition, these people are impossible to please. But have you noticed how often in your life you've been trying to please people who are impossible to please and trying to get people to understand you when they never have understood you? They never have. So why keep trying? Simply stop it. There are many people who spend their entire lives with this self-destructive mindset. And I know that this was this was perhaps the greatest negative influence in my life. I was orphaned when I was 6.5 years of age, and my grandmother took me to raise, and in all my life I've never seen so much negativity in such a small package. I still to this day do not understand how anybody could be that self-destructing so consistently. But she was. Now, before she died, great changes took place in her as the result of love. But I had to work so hard to overcome the damage, the contamination is the word, that had come into my mind as a child. And I say to you that one of the most foolish things that we do is to continue to expose ourselves to negativity radiation. Negative people are always sending out their negative vibrations, and if you get up close to it, you're going to be contaminated. Have you noticed that in recent years we've been quite concerned about nuclear radiation contamination? I promise you that it can never ever harm your body as much as the negative radiation and contamination that comes from people who have that terrible mindset. They're always caught up with a disaster, with a mugging report, with the worst thing that has just happened and the next worst thing that's going to happen. You know the kind of consciousness that I'm talking about. You simply do not have the responsibility to expose yourself to that kind of thinking. Whether it's a member of your family or one of your friends, it doesn't make any difference who it is. To thine own self be true, and then it follows this night today, thou canst not then be false to any person, to your higher self. Give yourself the freedom and the right to not have to be diminished by these demeaning devices of mind control that people have a tendency to use on each other. You can quietly, effectively go your own way. Quietly steal away. Your consciousness is the pearl of great price, and protected at all costs. As I finished writing in my notes this morning that last statement, someone buzzed my telephone. Someone that had answered the phone buzzed me and said that there was a caller from Omaha, Nebraska, who was placing a large order for cassette tapes. You know, our cassette tapes go out all over the world. And that she wanted to talk to me for just a minute. She knew that I was getting ready for class. And I came on the line, and she was so pleasant, so thoughtful. She said that she had known me for less than a month, and only through some cassettes that she had picked up at Unity Village. And she said that she listened to those lessons every day. She had a cassette recorder in her car, and they had changed her life dramatically, and she gave one or two examples of changes. And then there was a long pause. It seemed as though she was trying to get up the nerve to tell me something, and I could tell that she was crying. You know sometimes how you can tell that a person is crying? There's a change in their voice. It happens to me. I cry a lot. Not because I hurt a lot, but because I just feel good. And then when she spoke, I was amazed. And I'm embarrassed to share her words with you, but I must, because it makes a very important point in this lesson tonight. It's a part of my life today that I'm sharing with you. And when she could speak, through her tears and through her embarrassment, she said, "The world needs more people like you." Now, I don't tell you this to get you to agree with someone else's praise, but because that statement, in fact, her whole conversation seemed to be a direct rebuttal to the first call that I received that morning. The first lady said, and I wrote it down, when she said it, "You are a phony, and you don't have a right to exist upon the earth." And then the second lady said, "The world needs more people like you." Well, when we hung up, having finished our conversation, I leaned back in my chair and I laughed. And I thought, if I had mishandled that first call, if I had become angry or defensive or resentful, if I had blamed her and judged her, if I had become depressed, diminished, if I had let her bring me down to where she was, if I had not paused and truly loved her, understanding her, she did not understand me. She never will. There's not enough years left for that first lady to understand me, I'll tell you. But it was my responsibility to understand her. And I tried with all my heart. Now, what do you think? If I had mishandled that call, do you think the next call would have come in? Is this a spiritual universe? Is there a God, an intelligent, loving, responsive creator? Is there? Does the universe always send back into our lives what we send out to others? Does it? If you can change your response in one moment, will a miracle take place and you will receive a response equal to that in another moment? Will it? Of course it will. But so frequently the events are so far apart that we don't connect them. I promise you that if there's someone in your life now who has been pushing your buttons and causing you to react in a way that is less than complimentary to your spiritual identity, know that if you've been reacting negatively, it's not been the spirit in you, your individuality. It's only been personality responding to personality. And this is where problems always are. When my personality responds to another person's personality, there's a problem. But if I would grow, if I would change, I must take the events that come to me naturally and respond just as Lenore did. You think she loved looking at her brand new car with $1,000 damage on the side? But she had to love the man who was even accusing her of the accident that she did not cause. And the result was astonishing for her. It will always be that way because this is a universe that knows exactly what's happening to each one of us all the time. Now, which of those ladies do you think that I agreed with? Neither. Neither one of them. But I'm very grateful for both of them. You see, I need the people who don't understand me. Well, I need them to help me grow. I need them to work with. This is where I can make my demonstration in life. I also need the people who do understand me to confirm my growth and make my life a joy, just as you make my life a joy. Now, as I wrote that line, guess what happened? My door opened. And Fran, one of our secretaries, walked in, and she had just opened a package with a letter. And the package contained a lovely painting that was painted just for me by someone that I do not know. Not really, except that we are a part of this fellowship of the Spirit. And she wrote to me, "Dear friend, God and I love you very much, and I bless you and thank God for you every day. You've given me so much. What God has given you, you have shared so freely and beautifully. I want to share with you also, so please accept this gift as a gift of spirit. I know that you love the Southwest, and I hope that this painting will speak to you of the beauty of Arizona." And there was a lovely painting, and it's downstairs, and I'll show it to you after class. Well, I do love the Southwest. Dostoevsky wrote in The Brothers Karamazov, "Men reject their prophets and slay them, but they love their martyrs and honor those whom they have slain." My beautiful friend, why should you allow yourself to be slain, even if it is done psychologically or emotionally? Why do you let people chop you up into little pieces? There's a better way to react. Do not wait until people understand you to change your reaction. Because you and I will never become prophets on this earth in our own time. We will not be. To be quietly effective, being able to wink at the world, to laugh at yourself, and to smile and love the people who do not understand you will be the measure of your new nature. God loves you and is sending you even now your great good. And I love you too. God bless you.